Ask away.
Okay, so what's your full name?
My full name is Sheldon Aaron Goldberg.
Okay, and when and where were you born?
Detroit, Michigan, 1938.
Okay. And what branch of the armed forces did you serve in? What was your rank and how long were you in the force?
I served in the Air Force. I enlisted first in the Coast Guard Reserve for about 6 months, and then I switched over to the Air Force. I enlisted. 5 years later, I got a commission. I retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1985, so my total military career is like 2 months short of 30 years.
During the Vietnam War, what unit were you a part of?
I was with the 497th Tactical Fighter Squadron, which was the only night dedicated fighter squadron in the Air Force.
Okay. And what was your job in the unit?
I was a weapons systems officer. I was a backseater in a Phantom F4D.
And what do you remember about growing up in Detroit?
What do I remember about growing up in Detroit? This is a long story. Detroit really wasn't, at that time, really wasn't a great place for kids. I mean, I went to school, I went to elementary school, I went to intermediate, then they called it intermediate school. I went to the best high school in the city. I was fortunate in doing that. I was in the AZA. Had girlfriends like everybody else.
Growing up?
Well, I guess the most important thing was that when I was 9 years old, I started playing the clarinet, and that had impact through a lot of my life afterwards, because I got into the high school band, which was really, really a great band. And we went to Chicago for the Midwest National Band Clinic back in 1954 or 55, not quite sure. Turned out to be the best band that they'd had there in years.
And do you remember any jobs you had before joining the military?
Yeah, I worked in a delicatessen for a while, and I worked in a drugstore, 2 different drugstores.
Did you have any hobbies or interests?
Building airplanes, model airplanes, music.
Did you do anything between high school and your service in the Coast Guard, or?
No, I mean, I was in the Coast Guard Reserves while I was in high school.
Oh, okay.
And then, long story short, I quit high school. I dropped out. After I was supposed to graduate, I was in like the fourth year, and I dropped out and joined the Air Force. So I went directly from one to the other.
Okay, and did any of your friends join, or was it just your decision sort of thing?
No, it was turned out that when I got to basic training, the first or the second day I was there, I found one of my schoolmates had also joined. He had auditioned before the Air Force Band. He was a baritone player, and he was set to go into the Air Force Band system. And he saw me, and he arranged for me to wind up in the basic drum and bugle corps.
And what made you choose the Air Force over other branches?
Airplanes. I wanted to fly.
And what was a typical day like in training?
In basic?
Yeah.
Marching mostly, practicing, because I was in the drum and bugle corps, so we'd be rehearsing for the weekly parades that they had. And sometimes we had a parade in town on a special holiday or something like that.
Oh, you don't?
I mean, we did have, if you want to call them drill sergeants, I mean, they were the ones that were responsible for training us, in a sense, as far as marching and knowing Air Force regulations, proper wear of the uniform, things of that nature. We still got that kind of stuff.
And then what was the first place you were shipped overseas after joining the Air Force?
Germany was the first place I went, and that was 6 months after I got out of basic. I had been assigned first to the SAC Command Band in Omaha, Nebraska, at SAC headquarters, Offutt Air Force Base. And I went overseas 6 months later to Germany, to Wiesbaden, to the United States Air Forces in Europe Command Band.
Or was at that time was it just your orders were as a band member?
Right.
Okay. What made you decide to? What happened after you left the band and went to college? I assume to
No.
get your commission, or
Yeah, I went to officer candidate school.
okay.
What made me decide?
Yeah.
Yeah, being married, getting married, having kids, and realizing that I wasn't the best musician in the world, and that the Air Force career for me as a musician wasn't going to take me any place, and I wanted to fly, so I applied for officer candidate school, and I was accepted.
And what was officer candidate school like?
The first the first 9 months was hell, because we had an upper class that were constantly on you, drilling, you know. You had to square your meals, you had to go to various classes and stuff like that, a lot of physical training, so on and so forth. And then 3 months later you became upper class, and then you did the same to the lower class. But that was much better when you were an upperclassman, obviously.
After you graduated officers candidate school, what was your first destination?
My first assignment, I wound up at, first I went to Harlingen Air Force Base in Texas for basic Navigator training. Then I went to Sacramento, California. What's the name of the base there? I forgot. For Bombardier Navigator training. And that was all for naught, because I wound up at McCord Air Force Base flying cargo airplanes, C-124s at first, and then C-141s, the first jet transports after that.
When were you assigned to was it the 497 you said?
Oh, that was years later.
Oh, okay.
Because in the interim, I did get a college degree. I got a graduate school college scholarship at the University of Wisconsin, and that's when I got my orders to go to Georgia. Well, actually, we had to do a couple of things. I had to go for deep sea survival training down at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, then the radar lead-in training at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in New Mexico. Yeah, Davis-Monthan's New Mexico, I believe. I forgot. Not Tucson. No, Arizona. And then I went to George Air Force Base in Victorville, California, to get qualified in the F4. And then that was 1968. It started in 1969. I finally went overseas. I got overseas in May of 1969. That was to Ubon, Thailand, where the 8th TAC Fighter Wing was and where that squadron was.
Do you remember anything about your commanding officers at the time?
Yeah. Yeah, Dan Paris, they were all good. Bob Cass, great guy. I became their backseater for the most part after I got there.
What was your favorite part of your job, and what was your least favorite part of the job?
Didn't have a least favorite part. Favorite part was flying and doing what you were trained to do.
What were your style of missions like in going over Vietnam?
It wasn't actually in Vietnam. We flew mostly over Laos.
Okay.
And being a night mission, we flew what we called road recce. We would go along the trails looking for trucks to attack. We would fly combat air patrol over the AC-130 gunships to sort of protect them.
Mm-hmm.
We did things up in the northern part of Laos where we would use napalm on rice fields to prevent the North Vietnamese from having food. And then we started what they called the Owl Fat program. Our squadron nickname was Night Owls, and we became the first night fast-moving forward air controllers. And our job there was to control a couple of the passes, to close the passes between North Vietnam and Laos down. You've heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, yeah. To close those down, and mission lasted about October, November, December, 3 January, five months before they stopped it, and that was our primary mission then.
What went through your mind before missions? Did you have a mental state you were in before missions?
No, not really. I mean, this was I had full confidence in the crews that I flew with, the pilots that I flew with. I'm happy to say they have full confidence in me. The F4 had controls in the back so I could fly the airplane too. And we just went out to do a job and try to stay safe and not get shot down.
And
if you want to know if I ever got scared, yeah, there were a couple times I got scared, certainly. But for the most part, we were there. I was there primarily during the rainy season, so it was really, really very quiet. I didn't even get shot at until my 89th mission. And then when they did, it was like they were waiting for me. it was something else. But
and that was small arms fire?
No, this was regular AAA, 23 millimeter, 37 millimeter, 57 millimeter.
And do you have what type of experience did you have? Like, was it like an exciting experience of flying, or was it a scary experience? I assume.
Oh no, it was. I mean, it's hard to explain the experience in that sense. I mean, you've got a job to do, and so you're totally involved and engrossed in what you're doing. You know, making sure you're at the right altitudes, your right airspeeds, that you're avoiding the AAA, or you're spotting it, looking for trucks or something. Now, there were times that, yeah, we went in once on a place called Ratvink Valley, which was just to the southwest of Bankarai Pass. And we went in and dropped a flare, and the whole world exploded with all sorts of AAA, and it was so bad that we didn't even go down. We kind of stayed away. We tried to do it twice, and we really couldn't get in. It would have been death to try to go in, so we didn't. So we turned around and we went up to Mugia Pass, and it was a little bit quieter up there. When you found trucks and you were able to destroy them or damage them, then you kind of elated. I mean, you did your job. You did what you were trained to do.
Can you describe the scenes at all of like the landscape at all around? Or?
Well, in Laos where we flew, they have these things they call karsts. They're limestone mountains. And where we were flying primarily in the passes that can be very dangerous. There are airplanes that have flown into them. You had to be very careful, particularly when you're, as a forward air controller, you control other airplanes in the target area. So you had to make sure you knew exactly where you were, where the target was, where you wanted them to be, and what the area was around. So if they had to make an escape, or when they finished bombing and turn around, so they had to know that what the altitude of the karst was when they made their turns, because some jets make very wide turns as opposed to a propeller plane, which you literally turn on a dime. So flying nights, you really didn't see very much, but when you flew in the daytimes, the countryside is, you know, it's beautiful. It's lush, it's green. It's, you know, it's Southwest, Southeast Asia. It's hard to say, really. I mean, look at the pictures, you know.
What were the living conditions in terms of like sleep, food, and supplies in Thailand, right?
Yeah.
In Germany, what were the differences?
Well, there's a world of difference. I mean, Germany is a Western country. You get schnitzel and you get anything you want there, or you go to the club and you get American food and so on and so forth. In Thailand, we had an officers club. You could get basically anything from pizza to steak, whatever you wanted. If you went out, you go to Bangkok, it's a big city, all sorts of great restaurants and things like that. We even once went down to Pattaya Beach for a religious retreat, and on the way back, the people that I was driving with, he was a civilian that worked for the military there. And we stopped along the roadside, and they got these crabs that lived in the klongs there, and they steamed the crabs, and we ate that, you know. But it's basically, I think food is almost international now. You get almost anything anywhere.
Okay, and was that the same in terms of like where you slept and like lived? Was that?
Oh well, we were in what they called hooches. They were basically small rooms, sort of like a motel, if you will, with, I don't know, 8 to 10 rooms perhaps per side. We had 2 wings, and we had what we call our owl's nest in the middle, where we had our parties and stuff like that. Come back after a flight, you'd go in there and have a drink and relax or something. And it was just shared a room with somebody, had a locker to put your clothes in, and an air conditioner. I'm trying to remember, we had sort of like a table, like, because we had our stereo up on that. We had a refrigerator, and that was about it.
And that was in Thailand and Germany? It was the same?
No, that was in Thailand. In Germany, the barracks, of course, were big brick buildings. Still, you shared 2 to a room.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got married to my wife, we lived with her and her family in her apartment in the city.
So when you finally left Thailand, how did you feel after? Were you relieved after leaving Thailand? Or
No, actually, I was disappointed because I wanted to stay and finish up. I was cut back. They were downsizing, and I was cut back 10 weeks. And I wanted to finish the tour. I wanted to do the full year and I was looking to do 250 missions. So I was kind of disappointed. I was also disappointed in the assignment that I'd gotten, because I didn't want to go to where I went. And that was to the F-111s in New Mexico. I didn't want to go there.
And how many missions did you end up flying? Was it?
I flew 214 missions.
Okay. And were you promoted at all, like while you were in Thailand, or was it mostly when you were?
No, I was promoted after I came back.
Okay.
I went there as a captain. Left as a captain. I got promoted when I was back in the States.
Okay. How did you feel when the war ended in Vietnam?
Didn't really have any feelings one way or the other. I mean, I was already in Europe. I was looking in NATO, worried about the Soviets coming across. It was kind of a wasted effort, I think. I think a lot of people, if you talk to, was pretty much a wasted effort, because there was didn't appear to be any attempt to really win the war. And so I know a lot of people were very, very disappointed.
And when you left the military, how was it adjusting back to civilian life?
There was no real problem, actually. Because I had been in the States for, let's see. No, because I went back to Europe. I spent 10 years in Europe, came back. I was 4 years back in the States when I retired. So I was in a civilian environment, in a sense, that I was back in the States again. And I went to work for a think tank in DC, in Alexandria. And then I went to work back for the government again for the next 16 years. And it was just a transition, and I went back to school too. So it was just an easy transition. The only thing that worried me was whether I was going to be able to keep up in the school, because it had been so long since I'd been in school, because I was working on a doctorate at the time. And but apparently I was able to do it.
And did you keep in touch with any fellow servicemen after your time in Thailand? Or?
Well, I'm in a number of veterans organizations. I'm in the Military Order of the World Wars. I'm in the Distinguished Flying Cross Society. I'm in the Jewish War Veterans. So we do that. And then I'm in the Red River Valley Fighter Pilots Association. We have reunions every year. And within that reunion, our squadron, those of us that are still around, we have our own get-together, dinner, and talk war stories and stuff like that. So yeah, I keep in touch pretty much fairly close, I would say.
So after you left the military, you went back to get more. You went to school, I guess.
While I was working, yeah, I went back to the University of Maryland to work on a doctorate.
What would you say is you learned any life lessons from being in the military?
Pardon?
Did you learn any lessons from being in the military, like life experiences that are important from being in the military?
Well, yeah. I mean, I learned discipline, I learned leadership, I learned, never really thought about that much. Well, the one thing I did learn was I gained a very, very deep respect and yearning for education. Because like I said, I dropped out of high school, but while I was in the military, I was able to get a bachelor's degree, I was able to get a master's degree. And so, I mean, I looked kind of forward to the time that maybe when I got out, I could go further in my education. But it then qualified me also for the jobs that I got afterwards, to be a consultant, to a defense contractor, to go back work for the government again. So, yeah, these are things that I learned and tried to impart to my kids, in particular the value of education. Yeah. And in combat, that was probably also one of those things that you saw that you could do what you were trained to do and do it well. I mean, that's something. And I guess I have to admit, when I got my doctorate, when I got the degree, my PhD, that was an extremely happy day when I look back on where I had started from and where I wound up.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to leave any future messages to future generations who might watch this video?
No, I mean, the only thing I would do, and that we tried to do, and I tried to do in the Jewish War Veterans, is try in the lectures that I give, is to tell Jews that the military is a very good field to be part of. Again, because even today you can still get an education. You in fact, better now than before, because if you put some money away, the government will match it to, for you to go to college or stuff like that, and the trades that you can learn. That's one of the reasons when I enlisted, I had no intention of getting into the band field. That was a very naive thing I did. I wanted to learn something that would allow me to get out after 4 years and have a decent job and make decent money, get married and have a family. I had no intention at that time to make a career. But when my friend got me into the Drum and Bugle Corps, and then one day I came to the barracks, I was doing what we call additional duty, and nobody was there, and I found out that they were auditioning, and it never dawned on me to think, what are they auditioning for? I just grabbed my clarinet and I ran over to the band barracks and I played my heart out. I think I probably played better than I'd ever played before. And I found out I'd passed the audition, and I never thought about what. But in the interim, because we did have other things that we had to do in basic and take tests and stuff, I was set up to be an airborne radio operator, which I thought was great. I was going to learn electronics, I was going to fly, I was going to do all these things I wanted to do. But they said, you're a bypass specialist. You're going into band. And my first question was, well, how do I get out? And they said, you wait 18 months and you transfer. Well, that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I went to Europe. We traveled all over Europe. We've had audience with the Pope. We played for the King and Queen of Denmark. We played for the King and Queen of Norway. I traveled all over Europe. I saw things that I thought I'd never see before. And then when I got my commission, it was again a different world. I started to fly, and things moved from there. I think I was very, very fortunate, very lucky.
And any message you want to leave for me specifically?
For you specifically, I don't know you enough to leave. I think now I don't know. You see, you're doing this for yourself. I mean, do you have some plans or something to write an article about?
Well, I'm doing it for just to educate people in the future, and also just currently about older service members and service members just currently.
Well, what about yourself? Do you think about the service?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about where you'd like to do or where you'd like to go?
Not really. I don't.
No, that's something you might want to think about. I mean, I don't know what say your parents have background there. Something you can think about.
Yeah.
Stories. You want a war story? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I any story, but I mean,
Well, there was one mission we went on. Oh, I had 2 missions. I can tell you about 2 missions we went on. First of all, I got to set this up. The AC-130s, the gunships, one of them went up one day into Laos and shot up an area and came back and claimed all sorts of what we call BDA, bomb damage assessment, that he had done all these wonderful things. And when the film of that attack was reviewed and analyzed, it turns out that they had shot up an area in what they called a no-bomb zone. It was a restricted area. It belonged to the friendly forces on the other side. And the wing commander got very upset about that and said he was not going to accept any more claims of excessive bomb damage assessment unless it was confirmed by photo recce. Well, about a couple of weeks later, we went out. We started one of these missions in Ban Karai Pass. I was in the first airplane to do that. We used to fly out in 2s, and we would leapfrog with each airplane spending about 30 minutes over the target. We brought in some airplanes from Da Nang, was the first group, and we managed to find a convoy that was coming down Ban Karai Pass, and we stopped it, stopped the first truck, we stopped, damaged or blew up the 10th truck back or so, and then we brought in a couple other airplanes and they did some more damage, and finally we had to leave, and of course they kept rotating airplanes over for the rest of the night. When the next day came, our squadron commander came in and he was grinning from ear to ear because we had claimed 15 trucks destroyed and 15 trucks damaged when the night was over, and that had all been confirmed by photo recce. And what was really good about that is that a lot of people didn't think that we were doing anything in this OWLFAC business. So there was that. And then after they stopped that mission, we started what they called a rapid reaction system. We were in the bombing pause. This was now 1970. The bombing pause was still going, but we had reconnaissance aircraft flying in North Vietnam to see what they were doing. And the deal was they were unarmed. They were not supposed to be shot at. We weren't going to do anything. If they were shot at, we would, do something. One of them got shot at. It so happened that I was on this particular mission, and we went in, and for the first time, I went into North Vietnam. Well, it wasn't the first time. Actually, I have another story. And we attacked a SAM site and a gun site, and we just destroyed the thing. So that was one of the better missions that I have flown. I also got selected the month before. This was on February. In January, I got selected to do what they call a FAC exchange, and I went out on the USS Coral Sea, and I got to see what it was like to live and fly off of a carrier. And we flew up to North Vietnam in the area to do just what we call a barrier combat air patrol. That's to protect the carrier and the fleet. So if anybody came out to attack it or something, we would be there. And we were up, and that was my first mission into the North Vietnam area. So those are some of the war stories that I'm very proud of.
Wait, did your Judaism play any decision for you to join any specific to join the military, or you being Jewish? Did that have any impact on you joining the military?
No. In fact, I can't recall any kind of incident of anti-Semitism or anything like that. In fact, another story. One night, when I was the duty officer in the squadron, everybody was out. And behind the desk is this chalkboard, you know, we would with grease pencil on it. The flights, you know, who the crews and what their call sign is and takeoff times and stuff like that. And everybody was out. And I had this epiphany, and I got the grease pencil and I wrote up on the board, what's a nice Jewish boy like me doing in a place like this, killing Buddhists to make the world safe for Christianity? One of the pilots in the squadron was an author. He's written several books and articles and stuff like that. And he copied that down, and I'm immortalized in print. That's in there. So no, we were there. I was there. That was during the war of attrition in Israel, and I suggested at one point that because the Israelis had shot down more MiGs than the ATAC fighter wing had, and we were the leading MiG killers in the Air Force, that they take all those little red stars off the headquarters building and put in one great big Magen David. Put that up there. That didn't go over very well. But no, I think I was the only Jew in the flying wing, and it never affected me whatsoever. And it was maneuverable. It was really good. I mean, it just was, I guess, because of what I did. And now I've later flew the F-111. And if you'd have asked me if I had to go back to combat again, which airplane would I wanted to go back in, I would have said the 111. The 111 had a much better radar. Its systems were, you know, much more evolved. It was the F-4 was built, I think, originally in the 50s, you know, and here it is, the end of the 60s, and we're still flying it, and they've still been flying it. I don't think there's any F-4s. I think Singapore is flying F-4s now because my squadron is now become a training squadron, and I think they're in Singapore, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, the F-111 was the first true low-level, all-weather fighter bomber, if you will. I mean, we could fly down 200 feet above the ground. It was supersonic if you needed it. And the radar was such that I could see the chain links in a chain link fence. So, and, you know, now they've got, you know, night vision and all that other stuff. We didn't have that. Everything we did was with our eyes and visually. You know, we had an inertial navigation system that was pretty good. But sometimes it went haywire. There was a time that we flew off. We were supposed to fly and meet a, what they called a blind bat, an AC-130, a sort of a FAC, if you will. And we had a rendezvous point. We flew to, according to the inertial navigation system, to where we were supposed to meet them. We called them up on the radio, and they answered just like that, loud and clear. They said, down below you'll see what they called logs. These were like these glowing things that I've never seen one other than on the ground, you know. But they glowed, and it was in a form of a triangle. And they said, down there, and there was a river, they told us there's a river running from the northeast to the southwest, and that their logs are down there, and that's the target. And you're cleared as soon as you see us. Well, we didn't see them. So they said, okay, they had an inverted V on the top of their wings, the lights that they could turn up. They said, okay, we're turning up the lights. We didn't see them. I said, okay, they're gonna drop a flare. And about the time they said they were gonna drop a flare, we saw a flare ignite, but it was awful low, and it just didn't seem right that it would have come down. This was one that appeared to have been fired up. And we decided that we're not gonna drop any ordnance on that. That just something wasn't right. So they said, okay, fine, you know, apologize, said sorry about this, but we're going off. So we turned based on the inertial navigation system to go back home. And as we were flying, all of a sudden my pilot says, take a look at the whiskey compass. This was just a compass in fluid, you know, up there. And I took a list. We were supposed to be flying to the southwest. We were actually flying due east. We were probably flying across North Vietnam or the DMZ, heading out towards the Gulf of Tonkin. So we knew something was definitely wrong. So we turned around and using that, and I started to what we call air plot. Of course, reverse the time and the airspeed. And as we did that, and we came back to where we believed we were getting close, I think we talked to somebody first because we must have dropped our ordnance in an open, free bomb zone or something like that. And we said, well, let's kind of play like we're lost, give them a little practice, you know, guide us back and so on and so forth. And we did that, and they picked us up, and they vectored us back to the base, and we landed. When we landed, the INS system had zeroed out. In other words, it was where it was supposed to be. I went back after we debriefed intel and went back, and I plotted the course on the map, and as best as I can tell, those logs that we thought we saw from the blind bat were actually the markers of a special forces camp, probably in the Ashau Valley, as far as I could tell. And if we'd have bombed that, you know, we'd have wiped out a whole special forces unit or something like that, you know, which, you know, so we were very, very happy that we did not do that. So, I mean, and they checked the airplane out, they checked the INS out, because there is an error thing that it does occur in it, and sort of it oscillates, but it just wasn't like that. I mean, it wasn't telling you you're going southwest when we're actually going east, you know. But on the 111, you manually swing the wings back. It's got 3 set positions primarily. It's 26 degrees, something else, and then I don't know whether it's 45. I forgot. It's been a while. But and the other thing, I mean, fun. We did a test flight when I was at George. We did a test flight in an F4E model. This was the one that had the gun in the nose. Ours didn't have a gun. Okay. Although we flew a mission once, we strapped one on the middle, and man, it makes a lot of noise. And so we took it up. We had to test it out. We flew it out to Mach 2, and when we got past Mach 2, just past it, the pilot just pulled back on the stick and let the inertia just carry the airplane up. And we kept going up, 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 until we hit about 52,000 feet, and it kind of hung there, and then it just fell over and came back down. So, I mean, that's another...
So did you stall up there?
It's not really a stall. I mean, we just ran... He didn't, you know, he wasn't powering it anymore. We just let the inertia carry the airplane until we got up there. And at that point, the airplane just couldn't go anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And it just...
Is that the highest altitude you think you've
The highest I've been, yeah, 51 or 52, I don't remember.
Did that ever affect like that?
That is what caused me to become a navigator instead of a pilot. When I was in Germany in the band, I used to go up when I had nights free, nothing to do. I'd go down to Base Ops, and they had T-33s there. And the desk jocks that had office jobs and so on needed to fly, you know, 4 hours a month in order to get your flight pay. So they would, you know, go and fly for an hour and a half or something like that, a couple times a month. And I would try to get a ride with them in the back seat, which I did on about 10 occasions, I think. And I think on the last one, the airplane that I flew in, there was something wrong with the intercom system. He could talk to me, I could not talk to him. And so the oxygen regulator, the T-33, is down here. And it has 2 positions, it has normal and 100%. And when you fly and you go up above 10 10,000 feet, you need to switch to 100% because, so we were flying up and we did all the stuff we were doing. And when we were coming down, this was at night already down, when it was dark. And as he came down, he would do what we call lazy eights in the air to lose altitude, and at the end of each one he would do an aileron roll and then go down some more and do another one. Well, as we came down through 10,000 feet, my naive 18-year-old brain said, we're through 10,000 feet, oxygen. Well, I didn't have to do anything because if I was 100% we were going down, I had plenty of oxygen, but I turned and I bent down like that. The airplane went like that, and I had a textbook case of vertigo, and I was out, just like that. And I don't know whether I was out for 10 seconds or 10 minutes, because I couldn't say anything. And when I came to, the first thing I saw was the G meter, and it was 5 Gs. And I said, I can never be a pilot. I'd never be a fighter pilot. If I pass out at 5 Gs, I could never be a pilot. So when the time came in OCS that I had to make my decision which track that I was going to go, I took the nav track. I figured, oh, I'll still fly, still get the same amount of pay, you know, and hopefully I'll get some kind of airplane. Like I wanted to be a B-47 Navigator. I wanted to go to SAC because there's only one in the B-47. He's the Navigator Bombardier. And that didn't happen, but I wound up in fighters anyway, and I soon found out that you can acclimate yourself to Gs. And, you know, I could sit in the F4 and turn and look up the backside while pulling 6 or 6+ Gs. After I left, I had the opportunity to fly in an F-16. And this guy did 9 Gs. And I started to gray out, but I didn't black out. 9 Gs, so, you know, it could have been a fighter pilot after all.
You're right. Okay.
On the transports I did, I sat in the front seat on the transports a couple times. I mean, I had decided I was never going to let a pilot kill me. I was going to learn everything I could about every airplane I flew, and I did. I mean, I could start the engines in the C-124 or the jets. I could, you know, and the back seat, like I said, in the F4 had controls. I became an instructor navigator both in the 141, in the F4, and then later in the F-111. And in the F-111, of course, when I took other navs into the simulator, I played pilot. And so, I mean, I had to know how to take off and do all these things. And I have landed the F-4, I have refueled the F-4 all from the back seat. And those here in the States for 18 months, and then our squadron got disestablished, and they started the F-111 wing in England, Upper Hayford. And so I went to Upper Hayford and flew over there.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of 3 consecutive tours. I spent 10 years in Europe that time. It's a strange optical experience because, you know, you're up. You know, you come by, you're at 15,000 feet or something like that, and you're in this big F4, you know, and you look down and you see this little light down there in the blackness. And, you know, so you come down and you wonder how in the world are you going to get this thing on that. But,
right.
I mean, I flew with the squadron's executive officer, who was an outstanding pilot. And, I mean, we just came in and made that perfect landing. More scary was the takeoff, because my takeoff brief was in 2 seconds we're either going to be flying, or 4 seconds we're either going to be flying or we're going to be wet. That was my takeoff brief. On a runway, you're running down, you know, 10,000 feet, and you're going like that. And here, all of a sudden, you're sitting there, you know, you're strapped in, and you're sitting there. And of course, the other thing too, that the Navy F-4Bs, they don't have any stick or rudder at your throttles or anything like that. You have your electronic warfare equipment here, and you have what you call your tracking handle for the radar and so on there. And you're there, and then all of a sudden, pow! You know, you're catapulted, and then you sort of do almost a 0G transition. You know, just don't continue up. You always do that little sort of like
Like
that,
drop.
and then
Yeah,
then you go. That's a kind of a weird feeling.
right.